So I wanted to talk about this at San Diego Comic Con. First of all, let me apologize for not dropping a video it's been a few days, man, or a couple of days more so. But I wanted to talk about this during the San Diego Comic Con stuff, but it was crazy because of the Marvel stuff, the Marvel Cinematic Universe stuff. So things were nuts. But I had to touch back on this. Now, look, I guess let's just get into it real quick. Hold on. Let me just I believe the all right. So Dan Didio, he's the editor, if I'm not mistaken, of DC Comics, and what he's talking about here is some things that sort of DC they're doing that Marvel has been doing for a little bit, and that is reprinting old stuff, same ads, everything, just leaving them and just literally reprinting the old stuff. Now Dan says we reprint older issues of comics, including all the old ads and stuff. And in some cases, these are selling more than the new comics with these characters. People are more interested in buying the stories from 30 or 40 years ago than the contemporary stories. And that's a failure on us. We should be focused on moving things forward, always pushing the boundaries and finding new stories to tell. That's how we'll survive and grow this industry. Now, he's right in a sense that what his overall sort of line of thinking, where he's basically suggesting that we've been failing because people are more interested in old stuff than they are the new stuff, regardless of the sales. And more so, the sales actually dictate that they're more interested in those. Now, there's a multitude of different ways that we can look at this, but I agree in the sense that obviously he says we should be focused on moving forward, always pushing the boundaries and finding new stories to tell. That's how we'll survive the grow this industry. Now that's kind of generic, but this is what it all boils down to. This isn't exclusive to DC. This especially is in regards to Marvel. This is the whole reason why they picked that up as a thing that they're doing now, and that they're basically reprinting old material. That's not by accident. You know what I mean? That is good for business because they know they can sell those. But yes, it does highlight, it is kind of that double edged sword because it highlights the problem. It more so amplifies it and lets you in on it. That is, a lot of people are more interested in reading old stuff than they are reading the new stuff. So, what the executives, unfortunately, and this is where I'm kind of going to go on my tangent, it's not exclusive to Dan or anything like that. But what a lot of the executives, and you can see this, and if you, I mean, certainly if you look at them on Twitter, and if you look at some of the weird hirings that they're gonna have within their sort of ranks, these guys don't want to admit that for the most part there's a content problem, right? And this is why you saw, certainly in recent years, these different communities, guys like myself, guys like over there, like with Comicsgate communities, and all these different communities that have sort of come up, and their whole thing is to try to combat the nonsense that has been popping off in today's comic book industry, revamp it, change it for the better, because they see that there's a problem with everything that's taking place right now. So that in itself, what it seems to be the case, if you certainly read any of the thoughts and read some of the things that they say, they don't want to admit that guys like, again, myself or Comicsgate guys, like, they were right. They would never admit that. So even if they don't necessarily agree with the approach, whether they know it or not, they're admitting what guys like myself and other little communities that have sort of popped up, what we've been saying, and that is, look, you have a content issue. These books suck. These writers suck. And quite often their social and political agendas are sort of being reflected in these comics, and they're coming off as cheesy, corny, forced, and it sucks is what it ultimately boils down to. And the reason, and until they recognize that, And though we know they recognize, but until they actually acknowledge and do something about it, they're going to run into this problem. And everybody's looking, why is this the case? What's going on? I remember I did that video talking about Jerry Conway, and he's like, oh, you should ask other people what's going down. And I was like, dude, it's obvious. And even though he takes the position that is diametrically opposed to, again, having people be interested in the newer comics. And that is, he's so worried about Jerry Conway that is sticking it to like the comics gators, right? That's his thing. He's so worried, female authority. Yes, the reason I love that, some stupid fucking net. The reason I love that is because it sticks it to the comics gators who hated this story. Like that's what they're concerned with. And that's something that we're seeing that be presented in comic books. So executives just simply don't want to admit, for the most part, that there's a content problem. You have brought people into your ranks that have successfully infiltrated, and they're pumping out shit comics. A lot of these guys are diversity hires. You probably wouldn't even fucking admit that. But yes, a lot of these guys are diversity hires that have no business writing a fucking comic book. They have no business writing a comic book, period. But that's where we're at now. That's just where we're at. And they're putting out garbage. And the old stuff is going to continue to sell. Even at reprints, you got to understand and process that. These reprints aren't worth anything. And by worth, I mean like they're not like first prints where, you know, you can make a little change off of them if you own them. Some of these classic storylines. But people are more interested in buying reprints, new shit based off old shit. And that is the consumers literally saying, bro, we prefer how it was being done as opposed to whatever you guys are putting out now. That's the consumers telling you that, bro. They're telling you that. But I don't think they have it in them. Even though it seems like the elephant in the room to admit that they have made some questionable calls in terms of writers that they brought on and the content that they're putting out. I don't think the editors, I think DC's doing a way better job. So I give them credit there than what Marvel is as far as the types of books that they're putting out right now. But nonetheless, I think both of them have this problem where there's a lot of people that are writing comics that shouldn't be writing comics. And the stories that they're putting out are trash. And I don't know if, from my knowledge, an editor should have the gonads to be like, look, bro, I understand where you're going with it. You have some sort of talent, it's obvious, but we're not putting that shit out. We're not putting that shit out. And it does, to be fair, it takes a certain kind of man to do that, or woman. It does take a certain kind of person to be that. And we live in this day and age where everybody's getting offended at everything. Everybody thinks that they inherit some righteousness or more so rightful position, or to be, certainly if they're a minority, that they inherit this position, right? That they have a right to it, right? And if you don't put them in a position, then, you know, you're sexist, you're racist, you're something of that nature, right? I'm not saying that that's exclusively what's going on. I'm just saying, and I'm using that as an example. It does take a certain kind of individual to do that. But that's on the shot callers to put that person in a position to be like, look, I get it. I understand where you're going, but we're not putting that book out. There's no way we're putting that book out, not with that particular narrative or that particular storyline. Instead of just what it almost sounds like is that they're keeping the shit. I mean, they're putting the shit out there and it's like, whatever, bro. Like, so what are the editors actually doing? That's the question that I've been asked for the last 2 years. But nonetheless, they will continue to sell better, more so with the old new material that they're putting out than the exclusively new material that they're putting out. And again, that is speaking to the content problem, which would mean that Marvels of the world, DCs of the world would have to look at the own people that they're hiring, that they're bringing on to write these books, as well as the shot callers that are pushing this shit out. It has to go through all of these chains of command before they get put out, right? Before it makes it to the comic book store and the true consumer, as opposed to the comic book shops buying them from you guys. I'm talking about the true consumers actually go out there and purchase it. There's so many levels and so many chains of commands that have to pass before that happens. Somebody's not doing their job or not doing it well. but they will never admit that, which is why you get some of these individuals who like to point at guys like myself and say, hey, you're part of this toxic community. It's your fault that comics are in the shape that they are. And all I'm doing, I'm a response agency at best. You know what I mean? I'm just a guy that's analyzing what I see. I mean, you can knock that all you want, but I'm just a guy calling it like I see it, and it resonates with some people. If you had any sort of integrity, you would be looking at that, or more so integrity, or less about integrity and more just about sheer intellect to really analyze the situation and see, okay, if this person or these types of individuals have some sort of calling, or more so have some following, right? And individuals are wanting to follow, and they're consuming that information that they're putting forth, and we see that these guys are also comic book guys. There's something at least to it. It's not complete nonsense. I don't doubt that there's a bunch of people that are putting out a bunch of nonsense on either sides of this equation, but most definitely you have to at least analyze it and be like, all right, it means something, right? Because there wouldn't be no following if that was the case. So you could sit here and blame guys like myself that call this shit out, or you can actually address the problems that we're bringing up. I'm certainly one of the guys that I'm always talking about, look, I see a problem, I do a video on it, I analyze it, I'll field questions or anything like that, because ultimately I don't want to see the comic book industry just fucking crash. I don't want to see that. The reason why I'm criticizing this is because I do want to see better books put out. It's simple as that. I want to see better books put out, and I would love for more individuals to be part of the comic book community. I'm not some gatekeeper, contrary to some people's beliefs. I'm not a gatekeeper. I don't do that. I call the shit out if it's nonsense. Don't get me wrong. And I do think that there's some sort of elements that need to be addressed in that regards. But I'm not a gatekeeper. I would love as many individuals as possible to be a part of this shit and part of this community, but not for the sake of destroying it. That's all it is. So until executives realize that, hey, man, it's our problem, we're not getting the job done, then yes, old stuff will continue to sell, old first print stuff, as well as newly printed old stuff. And that sounds like that's what's going to keep you guys afloat, is just printing old shit. And that should tell you right there that there's something going on with the content right now, and you have to address it. Otherwise, you risk people just being exclusively interested in old shit, which a lot of people have gotten to that point, and they're like, I just buy back issues. I just buy old shit. I don't even want this new shit. So there's that.